AFP, John MacDougall Karl Marx Allee, the former East German government's showpiece of Stalinist-style buildings, is a frontline in a battle against Berlin's gentrification. Karl Marx Allee was the former East German government's showpiece, a wide boulevard lined with Stalinist-style buildings housing the comrades. Today, the avenue is a frontline in the battle against rampant gentrification in Berlin. A plan by a property management firm to offload 700 apartments on the boulevard to another company has raised the ire of tenants, who fear it could lead to rent hikes. A fight that erupted in November last year has culminated in what essentially is the renationalization of the apartments, ending a trend of privatization of social housing and bringing the ownership of the blocks back to their socialist origins. AFP, Tobias Schwartz, residents of Berlin's Karl Marx Allee are fearful of rent hikes after 700 flats were offloaded by the property management firm to another company. The emblematic struggle has also sparked a debate in the German capital on whether authorities should be allowed to take the radical step of requisitioning apartment buildings. Berlin's Mayor Michael Müller said the fight against property speculation was only beginning and that the city would look to reclaim more apartments from private hands following the Karl Marx Allee example. That means that privatization, which has turned out to be a mess, will be halted and apartments will once again be the responsibility of Berlin City, through public housing administrators, said Anja Keller, a tenant at Karl Marx Allee. Steep cost. But the move to renationalize the Karl Marx Allee buildings will come at a steep cost to the state, with estimates ranging at between 90 and 100 million euros, $100 minus 115 million. AFP, Tobias Schwartz. Karl Marx Allee is a broad 90-meter, 300-foot wide boulevard, lined with 7 to 9-story massive blocks in the classical socialist style of the 1950s. Critics also charge that it will violate the principle of protection for private property rights. Nevertheless, some tenants' rights activists want to push authorities to go further, with a drive underway for a referendum allowing the government to requisition properties from big companies that own more than 3,000 apartments in the capital. If initiators of the proposed referendum petition manage to collect 170,000 signatures by April, Berliners would get to vote on the issue. Like in cities worldwide, property prices in Berlin have shot up as it has shed its Cold War-divided past to establish its political might, and become a tourism and party hotspot as well as an investment magnet. Although there are still huge swaths of unbuilt land and new construction mushrooming across the city, many low-income locals are increasingly getting priced out of the market. The jump in property prices is all the more evident in places like Karl Marx Allee, which geographically sits close to the center of a unified Berlin. AFP, Tobias Schwartz. The dispute centered on the Karl Marx Allee apartments has culminated in what essentially is their renationalization, a broad 90-meter, 300-foot wide boulevard lined with 7 to 9-story massive blocks in the classical socialist style of the 1950s. Karl Marx Allee was built by the GDR communist government to impress the world and intimidate its own workers. Some in reunified Germany find the visual reminder of the communist years depressing, but many who call the street their home would not give it up for the world. What makes our Karl Marx Allee special is the architecture. We can imagine that we're in Moscow or Warsaw, said Ruth Nadovich, standing on her balcony overlooking the avenue that tanks rolled down during celebratory military parades. Running 2.6 kilometers through the heart of East Berlin, the buildings lining the boulevard were also known as wedding cake-style workers' palaces, for their decorative flourishes. Housing security, Anja Keller, who has lived in one of the blocks for 15 years, noted that, in the GDR era, residents from factory workers to managers lived next to each other in the flats. AFP, John MacDougall. Although Berlin still has huge swaths of unbuilt land and much new construction, many low-income locals are increasingly getting priced out of the market. I also came from East Germany, and in these buildings, I see something of what was positive about the regime. Housing security at a low price, said Keller, also a tenant representative. After reunification in 1990, the flats which were once owned by the communist state were entrusted to local authorities, who subsequently embarked on the path of partial privatization from 1993. Although the 700 apartments in question were in private hands, rents held at around €10 a square meter, the lower bracket of current market prices. But in November, tenants were informed that property owner Pradak was selling the apartments in 3 blocks to real estate consortium Deutsche Wohnen. The news sparked an outcry, with tenants fearing that Deutsche Wohnen, which owns 115,000 flats across Berlin and its surrounding regions, could significantly raise rents. Residents, lawyers and politicians leapt into action, and managed to force a court order for a temporary halt to the sale as tenants mulled using their first right to buy under Berlin property rules. In an ironic nod to history, a sufficient quorum of tenants called for a renationalization of the buildings. For the residents, their fight is not about nostalgia, a wordplay blending the German for nostalgia and the former East Germany. Most tenants never knew the regime, and they are the ones who are mobilized. They woke up through the communal action, Nadovich said.